Hirsch.
I'm Jim Carney, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
While many parents and educators appreciated that Mayor Bloomberg focused much-needed attention on education, a number of his strategies and agendas were met with criticism. With the election of Bill de Blasio came an expectation that this administration and its school's chancellor, Carmen Farina, would offer a new vision for public education in New York City, one that would close the persistent achievement gap and would enable large numbers of New York City students to graduate with the skills they need to succeed in college. Today, EdCast speaks with education leadership and policy expert David Bloomfield about the mayor's new design for education, equity and excellence.
One of the most recent policies the mayor has announced is the eventual mandatory inclusion of computer science into the curriculum of city schools. Later on in the program, I'll visit a school singled out by the mayor as an example of how computer science can be incorporated into the city curriculum. But we begin our discussion of education issues with Linda and Professor Bloomfield.
My guest today is David Bloomfield, Professor of Education Leadership, Law and Policy at Brooklyn College and the CUNY Graduate Center. He is the author of American Public Education Law, as well as numerous other publications. Professor Bloomfield worked as General Counsel to the New York City Board of Education and Senior Education Advisor to the Manhattan Borough President. He comments frequently on urban education and education law and is sought out for his expert testimony and assistance on education policy issues. Welcome to EdCast, and thank you for joining us today. As you know, with the pre-K enrollment behind the mayor, he recently announced a very large initiative consisting of many goals and plans for the city in terms of education. In a piece you recently wrote for the Hechinger Report, you referred to it as a feel-good speech. What did you mean by that?
I meant that there's nothing to oppose in this laundry list of positive programs. He calls for algebra courses in all middle schools. He wants something called a single shepherd for students starting in 6th grade who will follow students through high school. He wants computer education. He wants 2nd grade reading programs for struggling students. What's not to like?
Do you think they're not substantive enough, or do you think they're...
I think that they're wonderful. They're substantive. They are proposals.
Okay,
and so there are questions about whether he's going to succeed in implementing them. But they're fine, but not transformative.
Okay, so let's talk about them a little bit. Which ones of the many, and there is a long list, which ones impressed you the most?
Well, I think...
Or do you think are the most important?
Well, the most important is the reading.
Okay.
Reading is the gateway to all education, and we have too many students who aren't proficient at reading and then fall further and further behind. So if he can get that right with literacy instructors, and I say plural in every school, not just one, because there are likely to be perhaps dozens of students who need that extra help.
Right.
That would be a game changer.
Okay, that would be. And what else on that list?
I think the guidance makes a lot of sense, combined perhaps with a social work component to make sure that students attend school in the first instance, are not overwhelmed by family or neighborhood issues, and understand that this is about being college or career ready at the end, and can make it all the way through college and career ready, and not just people who have checked the box saying I'm a high school graduate, but all I can do is flip a burger.
What else? What about the AP? He's going to increase advanced placement, access to advanced placement courses. Do you think that's going to...
I'm not sure how important that is. Advanced placement, after all, is college courses. I don't think I ever took an AP class. I took my college courses in college. More important is having the regular core subjects taught well. Many of our schools don't even have a lab science sequence in biology, chemistry, and physics. I'd rather see that than the AP history or whatever courses he may offer in this program.
I know some people have said that our students would not some of the students would not be ready for AP courses, that it's unrealistic to think that there are enough students, you know, who will be ready. But let's go back a little bit to the math that you hitting on the algebra. What do you think of algebra for all?
Well, so that's what he calls it.
Yeah.
And there was a recent study that actually from the New School that decried the lack of algebra in middle schools. And we know that the math curriculum kind of slows down a little bit in 8th grade. And so I think that that's a positive thing for those students who are ready for it. Again, just as I said about the AP, I want to see that we have the pre-algebra core taken care of. But I think in many ways this speech was a feel-good PR speech. He wants to keep mayoral control. And so this is a way of going effectively to the electorate and through them to the legislature to say, I have plans, I have big plans, and you should keep mayoral control so that I can implement them.
Don't get rid of me in 1 year with mayoral control. I've got all these big ideas coming up.
And by the way, I think that's a chimera. Nobody's going to get rid of mayoral control. There's no alternative really on the table at this point.
Now, the renewal school idea, one of the things, a big issue and big criticism of Bloomberg administration was closing down failing schools, and the mayor is taking another approach. What do you think of his approach toward the...
Well, let me go back to the earlier mayor, to Bloomberg. The Bloomberg approach didn't work. It made it seem like he was doing something, but now we have over 90 schools that are failing. Those aren't de Blasio failures. That's the leftovers from the Bloomberg years. And so we can't just be willy-nilly closing schools. I believe entirely in the idea of renewing schools that in many ways were created to fail, while others were selected to win. I wrote an article called The Myth of the Failing School.
Yeah, I think people, tell us a little about why you think those schools were, if not created to fail, but certainly doomed to fail.
Right, so Bloomberg with his idea, which is not necessarily a bad idea, of small schools that were going to be sticky, more personalized, help kids stay in schools, created a situation where kids who weren't in those favored schools, which had great preferences in terms of budget and teachers and students, got all the publicity. And then there were these less resourced, less privileged schools, which in a way, if you think of the political mindset, I only have success to compare something that's not as good. So in a way, the mayor was able to whack these failing schools and say, look what I'm doing to improve the system.
Yeah, and he also sent some students from failing schools into schools that are on the cusp of failing, and now...
So the real question is now that de Blasio has responsibility, is this the right strategy to improve those schools? He's in a bind. The state legislature really, based on the governor's proposal, has set 1 and 2 year deadlines. And it's almost impossible to turn those schools around in that little time, given the situation, as I said, that de Blasio was left with. He wants to make them community schools. That's fine, but that really has more to do with social services than academic preparation. You're not going to raise test scores in 2 years by having counselors in the building or health clinics in the building. He has done some things through this plan to perhaps improve the academic outcomes, but they have so far to go in so little time that it's likely that we're going to see headlines this year and next that under state requirements, the mayor is either forced to close schools or to give them to receivers required by that state statute.
So you think he's just not really going to be given enough time
He's
to
in a
show
political
results.
box.
Now, another component of this plan, Equity and Excellence, that got a lot of publicity was the computer science education for everybody. It's already somewhat funded with business-private partnerships. Jim Carney had the opportunity to visit a school that's in the forefront of using computer science education, so let's take a look, okay?
Recently, MS 223 in the South Bronx was held up as an example by Mayor de Blasio of how public schools can teach computer sciences in elementary, middle, and high schools. Ramon Gonzalez is the principal of 223.
I think we want to give them a wide range of different ways technology is applied. And so we've done everything from electronics to robotics to coding. And what we're trying to prepare our kids is really flexibility. Understanding that a lot of jobs that we're going to expect our kids to do in technology may not even be created. And so we want them to have an approach that they are not afraid to take risks and try things and be willing to understand that it'll change and be ready for that change.
It is being ahead of the curve. It is making sure we have a Chromebook, a device in every high school student's hands. It is working with families that might not be able to do so otherwise and making sure that we get those devices in students' hands. It is bringing in organizations so that our 6th graders get a free desktop for their house upon entering our school. We have always made technology one of our core subjects. So always, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, this was one of their 5 subjects. They got it 5 days a week. I think what I'm seeing with my youngest students is that, like you said, they come in with this knowledge. You know, they were born, our youngest were born in 2004. The iPod was already out there. iPod Classic was there, you know. I didn't have mine yet, but it was there. And I think they just don't realize that what they know that is so natural to them, no, you're actually thinking in algorithms. You just don't realize it. And so what I feel like we do as teachers, some of those basic things, is just pointing out to them and giving them those words like, no, what you're doing is really technical and that's a skill, and adults are switching careers to learn this stuff because they got laid off elsewhere and they still want to continue on with the living, and you know how to do this naturally.
Do you see a traditional gender bias maybe on the part of young kids when they come?
You know, it's funny, I'm asked that question a lot, and we've always had our classes set up 50-50. We have 3 female instructors, 2 male instructors. So it's never been something that we've discussed in the school. I do understand that out in the industry, it's an issue. But I think we've always approached it that these are kids that we want, that are part of our regular makeup. So it's never been an issue of a gender. If anything, the girls have been far more aggressive than the boys, in that I think they want to make sure that they're heard, they're understood. And I love that part. I have seen over time a lot more girls raise their hands. I'm seeing it pretty equal. I think to start with our younger students, 6th and 7th graders, the girls are a little more quiet about it and shy, and it's like, it's okay. There are no, the lines have to get blurred and crossed, and I'm seeing that happen more easily each year. Well, one of the challenges is always making sure our staff is ready. Our staff is well trained. Our staff make sure the material is real world and relevant. So it requires a lot of training. That requires us bringing people in the industry to the school so kids can see what's happening. And it's also important that our kids see that what they're doing in school is what they're using in the industry. Once they understand that they're becoming experts to the software and hardware that's out there, I think that builds a different level of confidence that makes them ready for any experience. To me, I don't care if they go into a career with computer science. I don't care if they create websites and build a startup. I care about, do you believe in yourself? Are you confident? Can you see that you can lead others and have a voice and not be afraid? Can you push through that? And when they can, and I see that, that's what it's always about for me, always has been and always will be.
For EdCast, I'm Jim Carney. Now back to Linda in the studio.
What was your takeaway from looking at that school?
Well, they look like very committed, able educators. The question I have is, can we scale that up throughout the school system? That takes a lot of resources, particularly qualified teachers. That really is in the mayor's plan. He has a 10-year time horizon for this. But, of course, in 10 years, he's not going to be the mayor anymore. And so there is some question whether this is a real proposal or just the kind of thing that politicians do all the time, and then it kind of peters out, but they're not around to reap the blame or the reward.
Yeah, in this case also even the benefits. I mean, he is touting many benefits that are long-term that will definitely, he will not be present. So he really is either not going to have to take the blame or not take the credit.
Let me go back to the issue of the renewal schools.
Yeah.
So the renewal schools are under the gun to have students performing well on tests. They become test prep factories because of the gun that they have to their head. How are you going to put in this excellent idea of having computer literacy in all schools in one way or another, which gobbles up so much time, when you got to get those kids to pass the math and reading test? Now, can they really come up with a plan that's going to, in an interdisciplinary way, infuse the computer education into the academic subjects so that they can pass the tests and get effective computer education? And that's a problem with the Common Core, and that's a problem with this accountability movement, not with the mayor's proposal for computer ed. But you can't keep larding things on without having something give.
Well, you're going to an important issue that I think infuses this whole plan, and that is testing, and standardized testing, and the correlation of the opt-out movement. So it's one of the things you pointed out in your piece that he doesn't really address. So let's talk about that a little bit, and that is the testing issue. Do you think that this administration has said they are moving away from this over-reliance on standardized testing, and they're going to shorten tests, they're going to not give them as frequently? What's your take on testing and also the opt-out movement?
I love tests. I give tests. I walk into my education law classes every year with blue books.
Oh, you do? Right.
It's overuse of standardized tests and for purposes that they're not meant for, and the high stakes that are connected to those standardized tests.
Okay.
So really what has to be focused on are high stakes standardized tests, not testing in general. And
so is that the problem with the Common Core? It's not so much what's being taught as much as the testing that is linked to it?
Well, there are other problems with the Common Core, which I adverted to some degree, because you can't do everything, and there are difficulties with pacing. What if somebody didn't get subtraction in the first grade? All of a sudden, the second grade teacher is going to be in trouble, or the kid. And it has to be
No, that's
retaught.
true with any syllabus, I suppose.
Well, that's right, but that's the Common Core becomes so standardized. But aside from that, so many people do say that the biggest problem with the Common Core is the high-stakes testing that's attached to it, which is partly the responsibility of the authors of the Common Core. They didn't trust teachers enough to just teach it, so they said, well, we'll get you. We're going to have tests tied to the Common Core to make you teach it, and make you teach it at the pace that we're demanding. But going back to the high stakes, the mayor wants to lower the stakes.
Right.
But the governor saw him and raised him on the high stakes testing. And so, again, the mayor is in a bind because he has a state statute that requires over-reliance on standardized tests.
Okay, so let's go then to this. What else is missing from this vision that the mayor has presented?
Well, in my opinion, the reason that this isn't transformative is it maintains the tale of two cities, the haves and have-nots, and it throws some new programs toward the have-nots, but it maintains separation, and separate is not equal.
Separate in what way?
Well, we have one of the most segregated school systems in the country.
Okay.
We have many schools that are 90 or 95% or more students of color, low-income students of color. And I think what the mayor really needs to do to raise the achievement level overall.
Why is that so important? People ask me, why is it so important? If I'm giving equal resources, why does it matter so much that the schools be better integrated?
Well, there are two main reasons, and going back to somewhat of a third, the Supreme Court says you can't.
Okay.
Separate can never be equal, said the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education.
It's inherently unequal.
So, and the reason it's inherently unequal is because resources follow wealth. And in this country, wealth is race-based. And so there are two reasons. One is the resource element, and the other is that diversity is just a good thing in and of itself. To have different opinions, different backgrounds, that we really need diversity to come up with good education.
How can this be accomplished? Because obviously our elementary school students, they live in neighborhoods that are defined by race and income, and therefore they go, you see these schools are segregated by that alone. How do you see us having a better shot at diversity in schools? We don't want busing again. That was a big red flag. What do you think could be done to make schools more integrated?
Well, the first thing to understand is this is a highly technical field. It's not just a warm and fuzzy, open up the doors and everybody kind of shows up, black, white, Asian. A intensive community engagement strategy using opponents, in a sense, the wealthy who always feel put upon by these strategies, as well as people of low income. There are demographic questions as to how you move an attendance zone, and there's software available. If you move the attendance zone that way, how many more low-income kids or what housing development am I going to encompass through that?
Interesting.
And if you saw Show Me a Hero recently on HBO, that was about housing desegregation.
Interesting.
But it was about, it was bloody, but it was ultimately successful. And it has to do with making sure that all stakeholders have a role in determining this.
So you're saying it's not that intractable a problem. There are ways that you could do it. Okay. Quickly, we're really running out of time.
Political commitment, and that's, I think, what the mayor is worried about.
So in terms of mayoral control, are you in favor of mayoral control in general and specifically for this mayor?
Totally in favor of mayoral control for New York City.
Okay.
The reason for that is the mayor controls the budget. Back in the 20th century, the mayor used to point across the river at the old Board of Ed and say, "You're horrible, I'm not going to give you money." The Board of Education would point back across the river and say, "We're horrible because you won't give us money." To have the functional and budgetary responsibility housed at City Hall has created a system where the Board of Ed is no longer underfunded by the mayor. And so that's my main reason, as well as the decisional aspect, that it really helps to have a mayor who can create a program and make it happen.
Okay. There's been a lot of criticism already about this plan, and I have a question to ask you. Are you at all concerned that the fracturing of support for our first more progressive mayor in over 10 years is going to help solidify support for the more conservative side, leading us perhaps to the likelihood of an Eva Moskowitz for mayor, someone who would be totally unsympathetic to almost everything here? What's your feeling about that?
Well, you have to take the politics as it comes. And so we hardly can hold back in criticizing a de Blasio or an Obama if we're on that side of the fence, or for that matter, a Bloomberg, if you're on that side of the fence. And it really is about governance more than politics. And so we just have to do what we do in terms of what we have on the table. And what we have on the table, basically my position is I criticize Bloomberg for what he was doing. I'm criticizing de Blasio for what he's not doing.
That's an interesting distinction. Okay, we're running out of time, so my last question to you is Bill de Blasio the education mayor?
Bill de Blasio is the education politician. That may be two different things. In my piece for Hechinger Report, I said this speech made him the chancellor-in-chief. That's not what he should be doing. What he should be doing is creating a far-reaching vision for the public schools, I think, based on what we really need, which is a desegregation program, And he promised during the campaign that he was going to use multiple measures for the competitive high schools, like Stuyvesant, like Bronx Science, and he hasn't even done that.
So the two things are really major things for you are the diversity in the schools, that he really has to tackle that, and also taking a look at the selective high schools. But that may be part of the whole
those
other
are the two additional things.
Additional.
I mean,
devil's advocate,
from quality education in all schools?
He says he has a vision, of course. His vision is a quality education for all students, but you think there's more to go on that.
You're not going to get it if you don't nail down the desegregation and inequality issue. It was a speech on equality and excellence, and he didn't hit the equality piece.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today on EdCast, Professor David Bloomfield. Thank you so much. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
Parent bribery isn't new. From toddlerhood on, parents often encourage the behavior they want by promising a toy or special treat. When kids get older, some parents continue this approach by offering cash rewards for good grades. Is this an effective strategy? Numerous studies say no. Children rewarded for academic achievement lose their love of learning and start to feel entitled to payouts. Bottom line, set limits and let children learn for and by themselves.
Providing technology in classrooms seems high on everyone's education priority list. But new studies conducted by the International Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development indicate that computers do not improve student results. Students who use computers frequently in school don't outperform students who use them moderately. In fact, an over-reliance on technology was associated with lower educational outcomes in reading and math. While the experts work to figure out how to use technology more effectively, the warning is out that schools should think carefully about the ways they spend their technology dollars.
The Obama administration recently announced two major changes for higher education. The first is that students will be able to fill out the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, 3 months earlier, giving families more time to figure out how they can pay for college. The second is the release of the College Scorecard, a tool that compares universities on factors such as the amount of debt their students will incur and how much graduates earn. The idea is that these comparisons might ultimately lead to lower college costs and less student debt.
The College Scorecard does reveal that students who enroll in prestigious, wealthy schools earn more than those who don't. It also includes the disturbing news that graduates of some schools have lots of debt, but aren't earning much 10 years after graduation. But is this really the way to rank colleges? Is success only measured in dollars earned? The new Gallup-Purdue Index looks at the relationship between a student's college experience and life satisfaction. Here, there is little difference between students who went to top-ranked schools or those who went to private or public institutions.
Well, I guess the bottom line is that students and parents just have to look carefully, do their research, and pick the school that's right for them.
Yeah, figure out what they want to do with their lives and what's really important to you later on in your life.
Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
Till next time, class dismissed.